It's comic relief. Help us to help others. And come on down. Ridiculous.
That's on Friday, February the 5th at 7:35 on BBC One. Now on One, the programme which invites your comments and anything to do with television. Here with the main edition of Open Air are Bob Wellings and Susan Ray.
Hello and welcome to the programme. Today we're joined by an open-air old boy, the man with the golden voice and green fingers, Alan Titchmarsh.
And we look at this week's QED on the mysterious world of afterlife experiences. We're only a phone call away, so call us now.
The team from the Mill take your calls.
Glimpses of death. Have you experienced the afterlife?
And when will we be watching again?
This is the last chance this week to your say, so to protest or to praise, ring us now.
Hello again. Over the years, the BBC's Pebble Mill studios at Birmingham have been responsible for our daily menu of lunchtime viewing. On today's Open Air, we'll be taking your comments on the latest offering, Daytime Live, after a look at the story so far. And as I said, we're joined by Steve Waddell, the editor, the boss, and Alan Titchmarsh. You'll have to be quiet for a moment because the first questions are going to your boss.
Right.
Now, as you'll probably remember, Steve, that when this programme, Open Air, and you're a traitor, when Open Air started, the one thing that really had people going, we were deluged with complaints, was the removal of their beloved Pebble Mill at 1. Now, do you think that you've been accepted by those viewers? Daytime Live has filled that gap.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, Bob, seeing that compilation there, I mean, I worked on all those programmes. It was like seeing my life flash before me. And, of course, I think people were very loyal to Pebble Mill at 1, and it did have a tremendous following from a lot of people. But I think, as I said earlier on this morning, it's 18 months since Pebble Mill actually disappeared from the screens. And now our viewers overwhelmingly are saying they like the new format. And so I think Daytime Live is becoming established, and perhaps will run for as long as Pebble Mill at 1 did, one hopes.
Well, we have a fan on the phone, I believe. It's Amanda Churcher, and she's phoning from Leicestershire. Amanda, your comment or question for, well, either of them really, but what would you like to say?
Good morning, Mr. Weddle.
Good morning.
First of all, I'd like to say how much I enjoy your programme. And my question is, why cannot the programme go out at a time when there are more people of my age group at home?
Well, I mean, first of all, the programme is there to serve a lunchtime audience, and a lunchtime audience these days is quite a wide cross-section, because there are people of all ages, shift workers, unemployed people, and we are finding on Daytime Live that we do have quite a sizable young audience, particularly, of course, during school holidays. And also, a lot of young children and older children as well, young people, are able to get back at lunchtime to watch the programme. Of course, if anyone in London is watching who wants to give us an evening slot as well, we'll give it a go. So, but I'm glad you like the programme. Thank you very much.
Now, Amanda, do you accept that answer, or do you think he was just giving you BBC speak?
Well, I think people would prefer it on at night time because young children would more want it, well, people of my age, because it's interesting. They cover a lot of subjects,
yes,
which I like.
That's nice to hear, but as you heard, it's not his decision, it's them, really, isn't it?
Indeed, yes, that's right. Them
Them
who
up
must
there.
be obeyed, yes.
Right. Did you watch Pebble Mill at 1?
Yes, I mean, I worked, so in fact it was more difficult for me to watch Pebble Mill at 1 than it would be, ironically, to watch Daytime Live, because being a northerner, at that stage, my lunch hour up there was 12 till 1, which is Daytime Live's lunch hour. It wasn't 1 till 2, so as a working lad it was easier.
The reason I ask this is because I'm going to ask you, I was originally going to ask him, but why not put you through the mill? In what way would you say that Daytime Live is different to Pebble Mill at 1, or better, or whatever?
I think it's different in that all television programmes now really are made in a different way to the way they were made 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So Daytime Live, yes, it's got the technology to be a different programme. It's also, I think, got a different spirit to Pebble Mill at 1.
It is up to date in the 80s. I mean, that seems the flavour of it.
Well, we're not trying... Pebble Mill at 1 had an awful lot of good things. It was a magazine programme, and the similarity is in that it was a magazine. It was also in the foyer, so geographically we're in the same place. But I think the important thing we like to feel is that we are for now. Pebble Mill at 1 was actually for then, and we can cover an amazingly, I think, probably a wider range of issues than Pebble Mill at 1 did.
I must ask, with Wind in the Willows in mind, I always think I'm Eeyore and he was Tigger. He was awfully bouncy here. Is he bouncy there?
He's very bouncy. Actually, I first became aware of Alan's bounciness actually coming on Open Air a year ago when Alan interviewed me about the Tom O'Connor Road show, and I feel a little bit like Victor Kiam. I like the presenter so much I went out and bought him. So Bob, in fact, you better watch out, but I don't think we could afford your clothes allowance, you know, so but keep...
The man who was called by Michael Grade, a name to mention, to conjure with 18-karat gold. Yeah?
Yeah, but he's gone now, so it's no good to me anymore, is it?
Thanks very much. We'll join you again later, and we go now to beautifully dressed Natalie.
Well, in the early edition of Open Air this morning, we heard from Paul Harvey from Birmingham, who was one of the many viewers who called the BBC, complaining about last night's coverage of the Birmingham pub bombing appeal. Mr. Harvey felt coverage was biased in favour of the bombers. But Tony Harbron from Oxford is on the line now with, I think, a different point of view. Tony, morning.
Good morning. Yes,
you didn't agree with him?
In my opinion, it was a very controversial issue that was handled very well. I think the people who rang in to complain are perhaps confusing the issue a little. The actual news story yesterday was not the unquestionable horror of the bombings themselves, but it was reporting the rigorous legal examination of the evidence put forward at the original trial that led to the convictions of the 6 men. You know, the story was whether the forensic evidence and the confessions obtained in custody were valid. These were the aspects that were actually under trial and under scrutiny at the appeal, and I think the BBC handled it very well.
But what about Paul's point that he made earlier, that he felt too much time was spent talking to friends, relatives and supporters of the convicted men?
Well, I think these were the people that were the appeal was about, really. The original trial was to convict the men, but yesterday it was the evidence that was put forward that was on trial, and these were the people that were pressing that, and I think it was right to look for their opinions and their reactions to the trial.
Well, we have tried to mirror both points of view, Tony, and if you stay with us, we did also promise this morning that we would try and get a response to Paul's complaints. And we have a statement now from Tony Hall, who's editor of News and Current Affairs and Television, who said last night's 9 o'clock news devoted nearly 12 minutes to the Birmingham appeal. And they included details of the judgment, the reaction from the victims and relatives of the bombers, as well as the reactions of other people involved in the case. We also explored the ramifications for Anglo-Irish relations following on the decision not to prosecute RUC officers involved in the Stalker affair. We explored the doubts about conviction that led to the appeal. We explained clearly why the 3 judges had roundly rejected all the new points put to them. We covered all aspects of the story, and I believe we covered those aspects fairly. That statement from Tony Hall. Tony and Paul, who joined us earlier, thank you both very much. Don't forget, if you have a question for our guests on the programme today, then all you've got to do is to give us a ring. The number, as usual, 061 814 0424. Susan.
This week's edition of QED took us on a trip into the mysterious world of the afterlife. Glimpses of Death has provoked a huge response. Many of you called us after the programme on Wednesday evening with your own near-death experiences and with conflicting explanations for the phenomenon. David Hanson of Oxford wondered about the religious implications of the experiences. Ruth Porter from Glasgow compared the encounters with the influence of drugs. Well, we'll have more of your calls after this reminder from QED.
I didn't come to till about 11:30 in the morning, but in that time, from 6:30 till 11:30, I was up in what I presume to be heaven. It was really a tunnel of light. It was just a vivid brightness, very serene, tranquil. I went up to this beautiful park, vivid colours, and gorgeous music. A chorus of voices singing, and in the background there were sort of trumpets. Beautiful music. I saw several people that I knew. They appeared to have just gowns on, and I saw my father in this place. He, too, seemed to be sort of floating around, no effort. No words spoken, but come, welcome, you know, it's nice to see you again. In that time, my husband apparently was sent for and saw me and was told then that I had gone and told to come back the next day for my death certificate.
Well, Dr. Peter Fenwick, clinical neurophysiologist at St Thomas's Hospital, is here. He presented the QED programme on Wednesday evening. And we're also joined by Joan Johnston, who has had one of these experiences. Now, first of all, Dr. Fenwick, we've had a huge, as I said, we've had a huge number of calls about this. We've had about 200 to date. It's quite surprising. Does that surprise you, that number?
In a way it does surprise me, but in a way it doesn't. I think people who have these experiences are very affected by them, and they're very strong experiences, and we don't have any outlet in our society with which we can discuss them easily. And so I'm not surprised that a lot of people who feel them very strongly have in fact called in.
Well, Joan Johnston, can you briefly describe what happened to you?
Yes, my experience happened about 20 years ago. I was very ill at home with flu, and I just had this feeling I was going to die. And then suddenly I floated out of my body and up to the ceiling. I looked back, I could see myself in bed. But I think the real me was up at the ceiling, floating. That was the real me. And I floated upwards and out into the atmosphere. And I floated for what seemed quite a long time. And till I came to this beautiful green field with all these beautiful trees, very vivid green, and in one corner there was this brilliant white light, and out of the light my father appeared. He died a couple of years before, and he had his arms outstretched and he was smiling, so pleased to see me, and I floated towards him. But as I got near, he shook his head and he went to go back, and I had no choice then, really, to go forward or back. I just floated backwards and down and down and down, and till I was back in my body. And I woke up and I felt so much better. But as I woke up, I put my hands up and this vapour came out of my hands, like steam, really.
Really?
Like a vapour, just for a few seconds.
Dr. Fenwick, everybody describes practically the same experience, don't they? That's the remarkable thing.
It's really quite amazing that people's accounts are so similar, and it's not only in our culture, it's in other cultures as well. So it seems that if you're going to have one of these experiences, then they will contain mainly the same elements: the floating out of the body, they're going down the tunnel, possibly, and the deeper experience is going towards the white light and this all-pervading feeling of love and kindness, bliss.
Right. It's extraordinary. We've got a phone call now for you from David Hanson in Oxford. David. Hello, David.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Fenwick. The question I'd like to ask is, out-of-body states, as you've described, have also been experienced by people while practicing deep meditation or under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs. I'm just wondering whether this is in fact the same thing, and following on from that, whether in fact certain people are more likely to have this experience, or do we in fact all have this sort of potential?
That's a very interesting question, David, and it does raise a lot of fundamental points. Firstly, there is no doubt that there are structures within the brain which can give rise to the mystical experience. There is now a growing literature on it, and it's part of the brain which is called the limbic system. Now, there also have been studies which have looked at mystical experience in the population in general. For weak mystical experiences, about a third of the population will have it. But for deep mystical experiences of the sort that you find in the near-death experience, they tend to be quite more rare, about 4 or 5%. So then it looks as if mystical experience itself is part of the ordinary experiences that man can have. Now then, do the near-death experiences, are they different in any way, or do they suggest anything about the nature of the world? They probably aren't different in that they contain most of the same qualities, but what is unusual about them is the way that everybody has the same experience and the depth to which they go. So I think we can say then that the near-death experiences are part of the range of mystical experiences, and that these can be triggered by drugs, can be triggered by fear, can be triggered in situations which there doesn't seem to be a cause, but also by the near-death experiences.
Thank you for that call, David. You're talking here about mystical experiences, but you're a medical man, you're a scientist. Are you still sceptical of it at all?
I'm not sceptical of the experience, because the experiences are what people describe, and you only have to sit in your clinic talking to people, and these occur very widely. What is a question is the interpretation we put on it. Do we put on a scientific interpretation or a philosophical interpretation?
Do you think you'll ever get a complete scientific explanation for it?
We'll get a complete scientific explanation, but whether this will satisfy people or not is a different question, because science, you see, deals with, in this instance, deals with the brain and brain function. Now then, I'm not going to satisfy you by saying that you have a discharge in one particular area of your brain and this gives rise to a mystical experience. You'll open your eyes wide and look at me and say, good heavens, is that what you think life's about?
I certainly would.
Yes, and if you have these experiences, they are so strong and so meaningful that they change your life in the most remarkable way.
We have a phone call now from Penny Reynolds in Portsmouth. And Penny, what's the point you'd like to raise to Dr. Fenwick?
Well, there are two questions, really. The first is that one of the stages mentioned was entering a heavenly place. I believe that whilst undergoing an emergency operation, I experienced either death or near death, but I didn't go to a heavenly place. I went to what I could only class as my own personal hell. I was at the bottom of a pit with things that I personally find repulsive and frightening. And with me were imps who I believe represented my conscience. They were telling me that unless I helped myself, that this place would be where I'd remain. There was a so-called tunnel of light, but in my case it was the exit from the pit, more than a tunnel. I was aware, though, that I had to climb through this light to escape. I saw the nurses and the surgeons, and I heard the surgeon say, we've lost her. And I remember thinking, God, what's he on about? I can't stay down here. I don't want to die. And I recovered. Have you ever heard of these negative experiences before?
Yes, Penny, they do occur. Fortunately, they don't occur as often as the positive experiences. One assessment of it is that they occur in about 4% of near-death experiences, so they're definitely a minority. And that in itself is interesting, because one of the things that we know about the brain is that if it functions abnormally at all, then usually you get terrifying experiences, terrifying visions, feelings of fear and anxiety. But these seem to be very rare with the near-death experiences. Can I ask you, did you feel that it carried a personal message for you in any way?
I don't believe so. I just knew that in future I did not want to come back to this place. So if that governs my way of death or how I'm going to die, then yes, it has got a message, but I don't think it had a personal one.
Now that's interesting, because a lot of the people who were interviewed in QED said that they were not so frightened of death after this experience,
yes.
But obviously that does not work for people like Penny.
That was actually another point I wanted to make, the fact that on the programme they mentioned that because of their heavenly experiences they were no longer scared of death. Because of mine, I think that I can quite safely say that I'm terrified of dying. And I just wondered if it was therefore deliberate to show only heavenly experiences on your programme, with the fear maybe of frightening people.
No, it wasn't taken deliberately. It was taken because the positive experience are the most common. And this is what people usually talk about. Now, it may be that one of the reasons that there haven't been more negative experiences reported is because people are frightened to talk about them. But I don't think that's true.
If they are frightened, can you are with the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Yes.
Can that help people like that? Would you be interested for them to write to you? Could you help them in any way?
Yes, I think that's very important. The International Association for Near-Death Experiences does have a counselling service. Mm-hmm. And so people, if they write in to the association, then they may be able to get help.
Right, well, we'll give you that address now. It is the IANDS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, P.O. Box 193, London, SW1. And please enclose a stamped addressed envelope if you do want some information from the association. Now, we have another call from you. Alan Pilkington in Lancaster. Hello, Alan.
Good morning.
What's your question?
I'd just like to ask Dr. Fennick, has he ever thought or realised from some people that they can actually control this experience? I myself, some years ago, when I was a child, was able to drift into an experience such as this, in and out of it for a number of years.
Alan, thank you for that. The answer is that out-of-body experiences are ones that people can do specific mental processes to evoke in themselves. In other words, some forms of meditation can produce out-of-body experiences, and some techniques of relaxation can produce out-of-body experiences. So out-of-body experiences themselves are states of mind which can be controlled by the individual. But also some meditation techniques can evoke quite wide feelings of bliss and light. So it looks as if the elements of the near-death experience are part of our repertoire of experiences.
Thank you for that call, Alan. We've had a call from Irene Simpkins in Wiltshire, who says, do blind people have these out-of-body experiences, and can they see when they're having them?
That, Sue, is a fascinating question.
Isn't it?
I was on a programme with Robbie Vincent in London,
Mm-hmm.
and we put that question to the radio audience. And we got people who had become blind, who had visual phenomena in their experiences, but I haven't yet heard from somebody who's been blind from birth.
Well, I think you may, if anybody...
So I'd be very interested to hear
yes.
if it does actually occur.
That is a fascinating question. We have another question for you now from Thora Jones in Leeds. Good morning, Thora.
Good morning. I'm perfectly healthy, but I dream of death, and they're very realistic dreams. I dream that I'm walking with my sister, and she crosses the road, and I can't cross it because the curb is about 40 feet high. Then I find myself in a tunnel and start whizzing, and then I end up in a field where there's a sort of market garden or fairground and loads of people.
And this is a dream, Thora, not when you're unwell.
No, just ordinary. I mean, I've done it about 5 times lately, similar sort of things.
Thora, the real question is this: does it feel to you as if it's a dream?
No, I tell. Because the last dream, last week, I said to myself, I saw myself dead, they told me I was dead, and that Mrs. Pringle would sort me out. You know,
But
she does with the
Thora,
baby dead.
was it a
And
dream?
then I saw myself. I tried to get away from it, and I went to a forest, and I saw myself lying dead with my throat cut.
But the things about the near-death experiences is that they have this quality of absolute realness, of absolute truth. Is that the sort of experience that you have?
Yeah. Yes, and then when I woke up, I couldn't believe it. I kept telling myself, this is not a dream, this is real, I'll never get back.
Yes, all right. Well, I think the answer to that is that some dreams do take on a quality of reality, but people who've had even real dreams, when they have a near-death experience, say that it's nothing like that it has a quality of absolute truth that dreaming doesn't have, even real dreams.
Can I just bring Joan in? Would you agree with that, Joan?
Yes, I would actually. It's nothing like a dream.
It was nothing like a dream?
No, it's more real.
And you felt that it was your real self who was
yes.
floating, and
yes.
Who did you feel was lying down there?
Well, it was just a body. It just wasn't me that was lying in bed. The real me was the one that was floating. So it was completely different than a dream now.
Right.
Nothing like a dream.
I think we have another call, do we? We do have another call. Ted Wood. Hello, Ted from Barwell in Leicestershire. Good morning, Ted.
Yeah, good morning. I was interested when I heard your programme the other night about this dreaming or body lifting up above the bed. I had this experience about 6 years ago. I was laying in bed with the wife, my body rose up, and I was facing down, about a foot from the ceiling. I stopped rising, moved out of the door, inclined down the stairs, out through the front door which was open, went up above the rooftops, travelled along, and went to the centre of the village, about half a mile away. I looked down, and although I knew it was night, it was daylight when I was looking down. And I could see people moving about, but I couldn't recognise anybody.
I'll have to interrupt you there, Ted, because we are running out of time. It's such a fascinating subject. We could go on forever. But can you comment briefly on this? I mean, we're calling them near-death experiences, but we've had people calling in say that, well, I wasn't near death at all. I wasn't unwell.
Well, what Ted is describing is a standard out-of-body experience. There's a man called Stuart Twemlow who's looked at over 900 of these experiences, and they're quite common. They can occur in ordinary people doing ordinary things.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan Blakemore in this country has made a study, and it's her feeling that this is a psychological change and that it doesn't in any way relate to the spirit leaving the body. So you have the two views. You have the views of the people who have the experience, who say this represents a different form of reality. People like Susan Blakemore who say no, it's just a change in brain function.
And still the debate and the research goes on.
It certainly does.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Peter Fenwick, and thank you, Joan, for coming along and telling us about your experience. Thank you both. And now, Natalie in the phone-in room.
Well, so far we've received over 215 calls about QED, many of them from people who've had out-of-body experiences, many of them from people who have never mentioned it before. And they all describe this similar feeling of seeing a white light going peacefully into a tunnel, standing near their body and seeing and hearing all. Nigel Drake from Timperley rang in to say, in 1986 I was in a car accident and I had a similar experience and felt an overwhelming sense of calm, as did Peter Bentney from Baslow, Sandra Bradley from Bainton, Jenny Favell from Sheffield and Peter Hassel from Manchester. Also, a large number of you have been ringing in to say that you've had an out-of-body experience whilst nowhere near death. It happened to Mrs. Longmire from Oxford, Chlorine Hannigan from Androssan, Mrs. Boyle from Lyndhurst, Leela Elliott from Southport and Julie Pomfret from Durham, to name just a few. Other comments about the programme range from Ian McPherson from Edinburgh, who thought it was a very unscientific approach to tackling the subject on QED, but Anne Poxton from Radcliffe thought it was a really good programme, one of the best that he's seen on television in a very long time. An amazing response with some fascinating stories, and thanks to all those of you who rang in. And now for something entirely different and unscientific as we turn to the world of entertainment. Yesterday on Open Air we showed clips of 3 films and we asked you to phone in and to vote for the one you'd like to see on television. Well, more than 800 of you did, and you all voted for Angels 1-5, which was your favourite. But although many of you called in to say it was a good idea, a number of you rang in to complain that you couldn't get through to vote, like Mrs. Harper from Lowestoft, Vince Pickett from Sheffield, and Brenda Forum from Liverpool. Well, we were absolutely delighted with your response, and we promise that next time we do the vote, which will be in a month's time, we'll make sure that there are more people to answer the telephones. And now, last week on Open Air, we looked at a series called The War in Korea, and we talked to the man who wrote and presented it, that's Max Hastings. Now, many of the people who got in touch with the BBC actually fought out there, including James Gray from Stoke-on-Trent, who wrote asking for our help in tracing an old friend. Well, James and Sergeant Don Holmes, he's the one marked with the blue cross on the photograph, served together in the Royal Signals in Korea. And this is their photograph, them at Christmas in 1952. Well, they lost contact, sadly, and now James would love to get in touch. So Don Holmes, if you're watching, or if anyone who knows you is, then please give us a ring or write to us, and we'll pass it on to James. And that address, if you don't possess a telephone, the address is Open Air, that's P.O. Box 27, Oxford Road, Manchester, that's M60 1SJ. Susan.
Were you one of those people who were hooked on watching? It was the sitcom set on the Wirral about the developing love affair between the unlikely couple, Brenda and Malcolm.
Brenda, come here.
Get off. Perhaps we ought to sell tickets.
Yeah, perhaps. No, you are a messer. You can't stop coming back with the smarty answers. You tell lies, you cause endless trouble. But I still fancy you.
Do you?
Yeah.
Honest?
Honest?
That's nice. Hey, Mark?
Yeah.
Do that again.
All right.
20th century romance, as enacted by Paul Bown and Emma Ray as Malcolm and Brenda. Now, we've wheeled you chaps in here because we've got somebody in our lead studio who's adores the series, I gather. She is Gilly Fitzon, and she's in our lead studio, and she called us to ask if she'll ever be watching again. Gilly, hello.
Hello.
What do you like about it so much?
Oh, it's so different, so totally different. I've, especially the main character, Brenda. She's terrific.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Gilly. Sorry, you've got your head down. Let's see your... There you are. That's better. No need to be so shy. Have you got a question for either of them?
Well, is there going to be a new series? And if so, when's it going to be on?
Paul, Emma, either
Yes,
of you.
there is. There's going to be a new series. We're working on it at the moment. It's February the 19th it starts.
Oh,
and that'll be episode 9 or episode 1 of the second series, whichever you prefer.
I think there's probably going to be another couple after that.
Oh, really? Right, Gilly, what you're trying to ask something else there?
I was going to say, what time is it going to be on? Because it seemed to be on rather late last time.
Well, we've totally changed the time this time. It's on at 8:30 on a Friday night.
Oh, good. That's great. Have you been doing anything since the last series?
I haven't, no.
You'll be glad of the work then?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'm doing a bit of gardening, plenty of gardening.
We've got a man over here on the other side of the city to advise you about that.
Oh, wow.
Is it... I don't want to make comparisons with anything, but if you were to talk about Just Good Friends, you know, which was a romance that went on and on and on, how long can you sustain an unlikely romance and a will they, won't they, and, you know...
Well, providing the writer, Jim Hitchmo, keeps coming up with the scripts. I can see that there are so many sort of combinations of things you can use, but if there's still good scripts and if people still want to see it, I don't see why not, really.
Julie, can you see the attraction between them?
Well, it is a comedy, and I think if you go into these things too deeply, you can spoil the whole enjoyment of it. But there's so many other things going on as well. I mean, Paul, does your mother know that you're out today with a strange woman? I mean, she wouldn't like it, would she?
She certainly wouldn't, but if it's any consolation, I've got my vest on, so that's no problem.
Jolly good. And your scarf. And I mean, the characters in the pub, there's so much that could be written about them as well. There's lots of possibilities there, I would think. So the series could go on for quite a long time.
You like the understatedness of it all, do you, Julie?
Yes, yes.
Emma, what does she see in him, really?
I'm not sure. I really couldn't possibly...
Because she's really sort of sparky, and I mean, he wears vests.
I suppose that's what's so funny about it, really, though, that it's so unlikely, isn't it? And that's the only reason I think that's why it's done so well, really, isn't it?
Actually, we're slagging him off here, and he doesn't look in the least bit wimpish, really. I mean, in real life.
He's nothing like that, really.
It's all makeup, is it?
Mostly mine, yeah.
Right. So, remind us of the date again, when it's the first episode?
19th.
19th of February.
The 19th of February. So, Julie and an army of devoted fans will be tuning in then. So, thank you very much for coming in, and it's been very nice talking to you. And thanks to Julie for coming along in Leeds as well. Thank you. Thanks, Julie. Now, Bob.
Yes, if you can cast your mind back for a moment, I am indebted to Dr. Fenwick and to Joan Johnston, who leapt out of their seats with alarm and told me that, of course, Tigger and Winnie the Pooh are not in Wind in the Willows, but actually, Eeyore and Tigger are in Winnie the Pooh and not in Wind in the Willows. Many points. Thank you very much for the correction. Right now, on we go. Sandra Gidley from Hampshire likes the programme and likes the presenters. Mrs. Green from Grantham rang to say how much she enjoyed it. But Melanie Pickett from Dagenham wonders whether Daytime Live, that's what we're talking about, contravenes the Trades Descriptions Act by allowing musical groups to mime on the programme. The editor of Daytime Live, Steve Weddle, and presenter Alan Titchmarsh, as you know, are here to answer your calls on the latest Lunchtime magazine after a look at some of the recent happenings down at the mill.
Come on, here we go, here we go. Happy anniversary, Maisie! Margaret!
What are you doing? How did you get here? Hello, darling. Thank you. Oh, haven't you grown big since I last saw you?
Maisie, did you have any idea? Did you? Oh, look at it! That's the only reason I said I'd do it was for this.
I've loved you since you was on EastEnders when you went...
You said she was going to be like this, didn't you?
Didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I missed you on EastEnders.
Have you?
Yes.
Oh, but I'm very much alive, very much alive.
The big story, obviously, was the Burton-Taylor romance, which was, in a way, the last of the old-fashioned superstar Hollywood stories, wasn't it? What was that chemistry between them? Was it really that special?
Oh, yes, it was. They were extraordinary people, and whilst they possibly couldn't live together, they couldn't live without each other. And this has gone on for ad infinitum, and to the day he died, I think. There was still a sort of a funny sort of relationship between them.
What was it?
I mean, when you consider that they used to ring each other up, even when they were not married to each other. You know, even before Sally came along, when Susan was there. I mean, it wasn't just one-sided. They both did it.
What do you think was it in both of them that drew them together like that? What was that attraction?
I don't know, but Elizabeth has said more than once that if she'd married Richard first, there would be nobody else.
Right, some of the things that have been on Daytime Live. A couple of nice things for you before we hit you with a brick bat, all right? Aita Ball, I think it is, of Halifax, says of Daytime, brilliant. I'd like it 6 times a week, please, and more. We just saw him in that clip. More of Ross Davidson, boss, all right? Daytime Live, now this is interesting. Carolyn, interesting, given our conversation a little earlier, Carolyn Marsh of Thetford in Norfolk, congratulations for such a good programme. I was one of the thousands, or maybe millions, I don't know, who complained when Pebble Mill finished, but I now feel Daytime Live is much, much better, right?
Great. Can we go now?
Yes.
Can we go now?
No, because we're going to have
winning.
We're going to have a brick bat, and our first brick bat, I think, is coming from Melanie Pickett from Dagenham, the home of Ford. Your question, comment, accusation, Melanie.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
My comments to Mr. Waddell. Like you said before, are they not contravening the Advertising Act by calling the programme Daytime Live when the groups are obviously not live? I do enjoy the programme, but I think miming actually detracts
from the enjoyment of the programme, because a lot of them mind very badly.
Right.
I'd just like to know, is there a law?
Thank you. Good question. Trade Descriptions Act.
Well, I think in a way we certainly were contravening the Trades Description Act when Alan sang on the programme, because I don't think that was music at all, but he did a duet with Maggie Moon. As far as miming music goes on the programme, I mean, the first thing to say is that Daytime Live actually employs more musicians than any other programme on British television, and many of those musicians do play live. Recently we've had Humphrey Lyttelton, the Pasadena Roof Orchestra, Julian Lloyd-Webber, the list goes on, all musicians who play live, and we encourage them to do so whenever we can. But when you're talking about pop music, modern pop records today, very often it takes between 3 and 4 weeks to make one 3-minute track. And it's not always possible, in fact it's totally impossible, in the space of an hour and a half to actually get the quality of sound in a rehearsal that you need on a modern pop track. So if we gave up miming altogether, then it would be no more pop music on Daytime Live.
Right, thank you. That must be the answer, because we have a lot of people dying to get on the programme. Could we have the next call? Are they all lined up ready to fire, please? Elizabeth Barwell from Leicester. Your question or comment, please, Elizabeth.
Yes, I'd like to know why they feel the need in the middle of the programme to give us a trailer as to what's going to go on in the rest of the programme. We've already been told at the beginning what's coming on. Do they think we're too stupid to remember, or have they sort of got to keep using gimmicks to keep us watching rather than the stuff that is on?
Mr. Editor.
Well, certainly, I mean, our audience are very intelligent and very wise, and we would never think they were stupid for a minute, and so it's not because of that. You have to understand, Elizabeth, that one of the things about a show at lunchtime is that people are sort of arriving in from about 12:05 onwards. They're popping in, and very often they may miss the beginning of the programme. So what we're doing with the Coming Up feature, which usually comes in about 12:25, is to capture the new viewers and say, if you've just joined us, this is what's on the show. For people who've been with us from 12:05 to 5 to 1, well, if you could just bear with us to let the other viewers know what's going on.
Do you now let him off the hook? I mean, do you accept that answer?
Yeah, I feel that's fair enough, but
Yeah.
I think these sort of computer graphics that they use to say it, why can't Alan just sort of say, and next we will be having such and such and such, rather than all the sort of pretty gimmickry of the slogan and the pictures.
You're not telling me, Elizabeth, that you'd rather look at me saying what's coming up than looking at some pretty computer graphics? Surely.
What I'd rather see you doing is digging my garden.
Oh.
Nobody else will
I
do it.
walked into that, really, didn't I?
Yes, we have your name and address. So a bit of
Right.
gardening down Leicestershire way. Yes, Leicester. That's right.
That's lovely.
Thank you very much for that. A call now from Sandra Gidley, I think it is. Sandra Gidley, phoning us from Romsey, I imagine, in Hampshire. Your question, please.
That's right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to ask Steve Weddell a question, if I may. Quite a few times I've been watching the programme, and it's been quite an interesting interview or feature, and it seems to have been wound up very quickly. And the thing that really got me going was when Jane Asher had brought all her wonderful cakes in, and there was a My Little Pony castle right at the end. And we only got sort of about half of the way through, and all this effort had been put in, and the item was cut really short. Now, I appreciate you have some sort of timetable. How rigid did you have to stick to it? And, why do you cut items so short?
As we do, yes.
Indeed. Well, Sandra, you should have seen Jane Asher and the researcher who did the item after the programme. I mean, it is very frustrating for some members of the production team, and that happens as well. But we are restricted to a time slot, and occasionally items earlier in the show may overrun. I mean, if a guest gets into an interesting story, but we can't interrupt them, we have to let them finish that story, and it has a knock-on effect. So wherever we can, we try not to cut people off too brutally, but there are occasions when there is no polite way of doing it, alas. We try and do it as politely as possible, but we'll try and make sure it doesn't happen quite so much if you feel it's been going on too much.
Thank you very much for that. My apologies not only about Winnie the Pooh, but because I called you Weddell at the beginning of the programme, everyone is also calling you. It is actually Weddell, isn't
Well,
it?
I have to say, Bob, since it's been announced I've been coming on the programme, I've had Weddell, Waddle, Weddell and Weddell, so I wait to see what comes next.
What do you prefer?
I prefer Weddell.
Weddell, right.
Yes.
Fine. Question now coming in for Alan from Pat Fordham from West Yorkshire.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello,
Pat.
Alan.
Yes, Pat.
My husband and I are very keen gardeners, and one of the things that we always think about in connection with yourself is that you make gardening sound such great fun, which it is. We'd like to see more gardening on Daytime Live, but my question is, would you like to have a programme devoted entirely to gardening?
Interesting question, because I don't know whether you're trying to sort of move away from gardening. I mean, this is a new life for you on Daytime.
Well, I think one slot a week on Daytime Live is enough, really. It's a slot on a Friday, which seems to be everybody's gardening day, thinking of the weekend. I love doing Daytime Live and branching out in a way. It's, if you like, gives me the opportunity to talk to lots of people that any man in the street would like to talk to. I'm a very curious person. The long and the short of it is I've not actually been offered my own gardening programme. Whether I would do it or not is another matter. It depends what kind of gardening programme it was, but I would like to do something a little bit different with gardening. I've been doing 5-minute gardening slots for about 9 or 10 years now, if you can believe that, and I felt that doing Daytime Live, and indeed doing Open Air, was a great chance just to broaden my outlook. I've certainly not stopped, but who can tell?
Thank you for that question from Yorkshire and from a Yorkshireman's answer. Now, let us quickly get in Sue Hunt, phoning us from Dover. Sue, wham in your question, please.
Yes, good morning. It's for Mr. Weddell. I'd like to ask him, with all the publicity that there's been recently about the amount of money that the BBC is spending, is it really necessary for 2 presenters to accompany your competition winners on their trip to Australia, bearing in mind that programmes are now made in conjunction with Network 7 there?
Well, Sue, the thing about the trip to Australia is that we're not only going out to accompany the competition winners. As you know, it's bicentennial year, and let's face it, who doesn't know? And the reason that Alan and Pam are going out is that we feel over the last few weeks there's been an awful lot in Australia, but most of it has been, I think, in many respects, all the things you'd expect: the kangaroos, the wombats, interviews with Rolf Harris. And what we were thinking was that really no one seems to be getting under the skin of what is the real Australia and who are the real Australians. So it seems a very good reason for us to send Alan and Pam out to find out who these people are. Having said that as well, Alan may not know this yet. We're actually flying them out economy class. They're staying in self-catering, and he'll sometimes be sharing rooms with the crew. Do you still want to go, Alan?
Why can't you get somebody from Network 7 to do it?
They wouldn't do it on that basis.
Sue Hunt, are you mollified by that BBC-type answer?
Well, yes, I suppose so. I presume he means that if they used Australian presenters to do it, they would probably show us the glossy side rather than the normal way of life.
And also, I think, if you have a programme, you naturally want to use your own people in...
Indeed.
And he's going to be travelling tourist and living in a
I've also I've seen the running order of what I've got to do in the two and a bit weeks I'm out there, and I know, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But it's a pretty punishing schedule. You've seen what Princess Diana and Prince Charles are looking like out there, just walking around in the heat. We're actually going to be working quite hard. Of course, I'm really looking forward to going, but it's not a holiday. This is about sort of 5 or 6 films to make.
Well, we'll be seeing you playing the piano. Princess Diana's done it.
Only chopsticks. That's all.
Right. Thank you very much for that question. Now, listening to us in their Pebble Mill studio in Birmingham are Floella Benjamin and Pamela Armstrong. Now, Pam, we've just heard that you are going to Australia with young Alan here. What about that question? I mean, should they have hired an Australian lady rather than you?
Well, we have our identity on the programme. I mean, what's been so exciting about working on Daytime Live, which has just started, let's face it, it's a new programme, it's just getting underway, is that we're building up an audience loyalty. And I think what is nice about us going is that our audience know us, we're the ones who are going, and we're the ones who are bringing the news back. And by the way, it's not self-catering hotels, it's tents.
Am I sharing one with you, Pamela?
Yes.
If you must.
Actually, what I really want to know from the ladies in Pebble Mill, Floella, how do you think the chaps have been doing? I mean, you've had the boss, so you've got to say he was wonderful. But what about Titchmarsh here? I mean, do you think the men have been hogging it this morning, that you should have been here?
Oh, no, we've got an exciting show coming up for you here at Birmingham. And I don't think so. I think Steve's done very well. I didn't know he could speak so well. He could be a presenter, you know, Steve. We've been cheering you here in the office.
Simon, get your husband to sign me up, Floella, immediately.
And Alan, I see he's wearing wonderful pink this morning and matching socks. Yes. I think they've done rather well, and we're very proud of them here at the Mill.
Right. Pamela, could I have your reaction that one of our comment cards, it's such a mess here that I'm not sure I can find it, but it was a nice lady from Thetford in Norfolk who rang in to say that she had been very upset when Pebble Mill disappeared and very cross about it. and would never forgive any replacement, and now liked and much preferred Daytime Live. I mean, that must be quite nice to hear, isn't it?
It's particularly heartwarming. As I said, our programme is only just beginning. We're just beginning to find our feet. Pebble Mill was on the air, I think, 14, maybe 15 years. So it had a long, long time to establish itself, and it had a wonderful audience who were very, very loyal to it. We hope that we're building up our audience. We have done a very little amount of research, and what seems to have happened is that, very thankfully, we've kept the Pebble Mill audience, and we're also broadening it. Apparently, there's a greater age range watching our programme. Both sexes watch it, because apparently, I think it was mainly women used to watch Pebble Mill, and also all social classes, and it's quite a different way that it's growing and developing. So we're very pleased, and we say hello to the Pebble Mill audience, and we say hello to everybody else who's watching us.
Well said, Pamela. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for a moment. Don't please go away. You're paid till the end of the show anyway, I think.
I'm here till 1 o'clock.
We're now whizzing across the studio to join Natalie.
Well, I hope that Pamela and Fluella are still with us, because Melita Webster from Grinsrace rang in to say that she likes Daytime Live better than any other programme because of the male presenters. Melita, shame on you. Mixed reaction coming in, reflecting the phone calls we're receiving about the programme. Sarah Brown from Salford's been on the line to say she much prefers Pebble Mill to Daytime Live. It was much slicker, she felt, and all round much better. However, Joe Killick from Lampeter thinks it's a great programme, the best of the day, because the presenters are so happy and smiling all the time. There's an interesting idea too from Brenda Silito from Adswood. She agrees with a caller earlier in the day that this type of programme should be on in the evening instead of the daily diet of soaps. Jane Snape from Nottingham isn't happy about the music. She says the items are very rushed. And Lynn Darby from Staffordshire and Marjorie Hughes from North Wales say, please, instead of the professionals, could you let the public have a go? Talking about professionals, back to Bob.
Thank you very much. Many thanks. Many thanks, Natalie. The man who doesn't know his Wyndon and Willers from his whatever. We might, I don't know whether it's the last word or not, because I'm not quite sure of the timings at this point. I'm told I can go to Birmingham if I want to and chat to the ladies there, but actually let's stay with the chaps. This Australia trip, Steve, does that indicate to us that the programme is going to be more ambitious? I mean, foreign trips, getting out of the country more, looking at different things, being more ambitious than, say, lunchtime programmes were in the past?
Well, I'm not sure about ambitious, because I think a programme like Daytime Live it wouldn't want to go abroad too much, because by and large we want to be concerned with people's everyday lives and also to entertain them, of course. And Australia is a special case.
Of course.
I don't think there's a case for going abroad too often, but I think it's crying out for it at this time in the bicentennial.
But we're a bit sulky about you pinching him from us. You are going to work him hard, aren't you?
We work him very hard, actually. I mean, I remember speaking to Alan and saying, we'd love you to join the programme, and he went, great. And I said, you do realise it's 5 days a week? And there was this long silence at the other end of the phone, and I thought, oh no, I've lost him.
Yeah.
But the mad fool decided to join us, and we're delighted he did.
Yes, well, you're doing all right, too.
I keep waiting for people to say, why didn't you stick to gardening, but fortunately they seem to be very good, and they appreciate that I'm just like any other bloke asking questions, and I think if you're interested, it really doesn't matter, what you originally learned, you can use it as well.
I've got to shut you up now. Right. Pamela and Fleola, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you all, Daytime Live, for joining us. Many thanks. Susan.
Right, the old clock on the wall and all that. As we reach the end of another week on Open Air, there's just time to uncover the gems in store for Monday's programme. Arguably the most impersonated man on the box, Alan Whicker will be here talking about his latest Australian series, Living with Waltzing Matilda, like Alan Titchmarsh and Pamela Armstrong. And we'll be fixing it for you to talk to Jimmy Savile, who also has a few mimics. He'll be taking a breather between marathons to be with us here in Manchester. Meantime, from all of us today, thanks to all of our guests for joining us. Have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.
And just to let you know that after the news in Daytime Live, a look at those who care for an elderly dependent at home, advice on the pruning of fruit trees, and a chat with guest of the day, Nicholas Parsons. Before Daytime Live, we have the latest news on BBC One from Moira Stewart.